Doherty.
Here.
Horn, Gaines, Crawford. Narcisse. Troncoso. Hernandez. Mr. Chairman, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's just presentation.
Okay. We don't have a quorum.
Okay, all right, well, this is just a multimodal transportation plan, status update presented by Ross. Okay, so that probably would help. Okay.
That one turned on? It should, oh, you know why? Because, it's not here, and she usually does it.
Here's your podium up the top.
That's
Try it
right.
now.
Testing. Perfect. Good evening, Commissioners. We're going to give you a quick update on the multimodal transportation plan. It's something we started just about 6-8 months ago. About a year now. Time flies when you're having fun. So, as we know, there are a few things lacking when this administration took office: a comprehensive plan, a transportation plan, a drainage plan, and all these things affect how growth is managed in St. Tammany Parish. Without these plans, we don't know what, we don't have a vision for the parish. So with that, we finished land use. After land use, we do transportation. You know, how are we going to access these particular land use types, and what kind of transportation facilities do we need? So that's what we're embarking on now. Plus, it opens up money from feds, state, and other potential revenue sources that we don't have a transportation plan now to access from. So this is extremely important for congestion, for safety improvements, for connectivity. It's just an all-around plan that we need for St. Tammany Parish. We held some public meetings back in August, September. We took a lot of that information, and it's informing where the most critical aspects of the parish are in regards to those top items that I said: congestion, connectivity, and safety. CSRS and Matthew Martinek is the project manager. He's going to give you a quick update. We have public meetings the third week of January. After that, we're going to be probably wrapping this up by the middle of February. This is just going to be a quick update to let you know what we've done, where we're going, and the big update towards the end of January, beginning of February. We'll then start wrapping up the plan, finalize it, hopefully get the commission to adopt it, and then from there start using that to get money to provide infrastructure improvements across the parish. So with that, I'll give it over to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross, and members of the commission. I will try to be brief, but please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask questions as we roll along here. I'm happy for an informal setting or formal questioning at the end. That being said here, to give you a sense of sort of where we are in this process, let's see. So we started back in October of 2022. We spent a lot of time doing sort of network analysis, really inventorying a lot of transportation plans that are out there, both at the regional level, ones that had been done, at least in draft form at the local level, local capital improvements programs, and really having an understanding of the sort of full inventory of projects that were out there. And just to clarify, so this is a multimodal transportation plan, which means that we're looking at all modes of transportation: ports, air, rail, alternative transportation, bike ped, as well as conventional roadway capacity. I will say the general theme here, and certainly what we've got in the public and what we've got from the our stakeholder groups and working groups with the administration, is that we know your pinch point right now is congestion and capacity. But there's also a sort of longer arc conversation about growth management and these kinds of things that have been seeded through your comprehensive planning efforts and work that you're already doing with your Unified Development Code rewrite that need to be tackled more substantively long term. But in the sort of short term, we know you've got a congestion and capacity issue. And so that's probably going to be a dominant theme as we continue to move forward. But where we are today is sort of reflected by the red dot on this timeline here. I would suspect that we're probably going to end up wrapping up by spring, summer of 2024. I would like to say early spring, but as we sort of progress this through commission and council and anticipating feedbacks and successive iterations of it, just knowing that sometimes these processes drag a little bit further than we would like. But we had a really successful round of public engagement in September, as Ross alluded to. We'll come back to the public again in late January, January 17th and 18th. And either concurrent or right out after that, we expect to have a first sort of draft of a multimodal transportation plan for the community to look at and digest and understand. But I think most of that, especially for folks who attended the public meetings, what will ultimately be in that draft form will, as the public would be expecting it, and in line with public priorities that have been pretty clearly established throughout our process, along with working with the administration and certain stakeholders. So with that, as you know, without being redundant here, we did see some very significant themes that sort of came out of the first round of public engagement. We did everything from asking them to sort of comment and articulate, draft vision, goals, and objectives, to really asking them to identify, of all of your inventory of projects that are sort of in the known universe, what are the priorities that the public is seeing? And then we asked them to really comment on how we can better leverage the Tammany Trace. So through all that, I would say the big things that came out are, we know we've got congestion and capacity issues. We know that in many ways, St. Tammany is two-car dependent, and two-car dependent with limited access related to that car dependency. There's limited opportunities for bicycle and safe pedestrian connections. There is consistent need for additional east-west capacity along the I-12 and 10 corridors, but there's also needs to relieve capacity and congestion north-south along that I-12, I-10 corridor. And then making sure that we're fully leveraging the connections and opportunities provided by the transportation, or provided by the Tammany Trace along your population centers along the I-12-10 corridor. So just a couple of quick image highlights from that particular process. The first night that we had here at the council chambers was extremely well attended. Did that in coordination with some of the public engagement around the Unified Development Code, and I think those things complemented themselves really well. But we did have a pretty significant turnout, both in person for that first round of public engagement, and we had a lot of online feedback that we were receiving through that process as well. So I won't, unless you want me to read the vision statement to you. I know, yeah, okay. All right. So our vision for the St. Tammany Parish Transportation Network is to build upon the parish's strong foundation of community while balancing demands for the suburban, rural, and natural environments to improve existing infrastructure, enhance commercial corridors, and promote neighborhood connectivity. The new connections should link our parks, communities, and commercial centers, as well as better connect the parish to the region, maintaining the parish's status as a premier place to live, work, and play. That's broad and all-encompassing, and it's intended to be so, but I think we'll find that all of the goals and objectives that we will articulate here in just a minute, after I get through my web authentication, are largely or are entirely in line with that vision statement. So we suggested, based on what we were seeing, some draft goals and objectives for the community to comment on, took that feedback, looked at some of the other planning documents that had been out there in the past as it related to transportation, and then really consolidated that public feedback, what we knew we were seeing, as well as some of that prior planning history, into a unified set of goals and objectives. First big one, roadway capacity improvements, and what will come through as part of our next steps here is really thinking programmatically about those capacity improvements and defining a scenario that I think is practical and achievable for the parish to really have a functional transportation program. I mean, you've got existing revenue streams, you've got a whole state and federal space that you can leverage that can inform a pretty robust transportation program to begin substantially chipping away at those capacity and congestion issues that you have. So we are, thinking holistically about this and not sort of in here's a whole slate of projects and, here's $1 billion, $2 billion list of unfunded mandates effectively, but how do we prioritize those things that we can actually get done and that the administration working with the council with the support of the commission can functionally advance into a true transportation program. So as a part of that process, we're looking at existing revenue streams and making sure that, what you can functionally bond or what you can functionally do from a pay-as-you-go progression, that we can link those to what your priority projects ultimately are. And then looking at things like making sure that you're doing context-sensitive roadway design standards. So if you're going to be robust about building projects, making sure that you're doing them in a thoughtful way, right? That's not just like high capacity, lots of concrete, lots of asphalt, sidewalks that no one wants to walk on, but, thinking functionally about street furniture, design, trees, landscaping, all of those types of things that, outside of vehicular use, make places that people want to walk. And then looking at emerging technologies. I mean, the transportation space is evolving rapidly. We've got things like micro-mobility coming into play that are really changing the way in which a lot of people move, to and from work and that type of thing. So, bike ped is almost a decade old now, and it's showing, right? There's a lot more sort of unconventional ways in which households establish their transportation decisions. So really thinking about streamlined policies and projects is goal 2. I think one of the big things that has emerged from our perspective, and certainly based on the public feedback that we've gotten, is that land use planning is nothing without coordinated transportation, environmental, and other infrastructure planning. And so knowing that we can have the best transportation program out there, but unless it's followed up by sort of long-term growth management decisions and really identifying where in this parish it makes sense to grow based on the population thrust that you have and the environmental constraints that you have, is absolutely critical to your sort of medium-range future. And knowing that that's got to be a broad-based sort of interjurisdictional collaboration of growth management decisions that are coming, that ultimately need to come in order to deploy infrastructure efficiently. Looking at, ways in which, if you're identifying growth areas, how do you ultimately think about providing infrastructure, whether it's transportation or otherwise, to service those growth areas so that those growth areas are viable and you're actually targeting growth where you want it to occur in the parish. And making sure that subdivision regulations and things like that are going to be addressed in your new Unified Development Code stress connectivity and stress multiple access points and those things that we know are sort of low-hanging fruits in terms of reducing congestion. And looking at, updated technologies and emerging modes of mobility, and making sure that we utilize this plan to map out future rights-of-way and corridors that ultimately we're going to need for roadway capacity and congestion long-term. So in terms of promoting alternative modes, we think that you have probably the best asset in the Gulf South, and that is the Tammany Trace. And so I think fortunately for the Trace and fortunately for you, the Trace corresponds pretty closely with your population centers through the parish. And so it's about making sure that neighborhoods that are along the Trace are functionally connected to it from an alternative transportation perspective, that, sidewalk connections, bike lane connections, those types of things are, really functional and usable from a user perspective, and that they're not sort of an afterthought, right? That the Tammany Trace is not just a sort of you head to the trailhead on the weekend type of thing, but it can also be used as a functional transportation corridor for live, work, and play uses. And then again, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, so this came from our public feedback pieces, I think on that commuter rail piece, what you do with that at the end of the day is obviously subject to the decision as a commission and council. But I will say that you've got a whole lot of money in passenger rail out there. You've got an existing Mobile to New Orleans service that's happening. There's a lot of ways to get pretty free passenger rail service if it's something that you desire to coordinate land use decisions around. Whether or not it's a priority of yours is a whole nother question, but the opportunity is out there should you choose to seize it. In terms of developing a coordinated approach, this is really about that larger medium to long-term growth management discussion that, from our perspective, and I think if you're thinking long-term about this parish, you've got to think interjurisdictionally about how you are managing and accommodating growth.
So how long is this plan? Is it like a 25-year plan, or what's the vision there?
So typically the transportation planning horizon is usually done on a 30-year period. In terms of like defining a transportation program that you can execute, I think more realistically you're targeting the sort of what are identified as, so without getting too far into the weeds here, transportation alignments and those types of things, capacity needs, are usually developed based on what we call a regional transportation traffic demand model. And that sort of based on census tract growth and all of these types of trends that inform how many vehicles and how many trips are occurring from particular types of land uses and places, that informs where capacity needs to go through that transportation modeling exercise. I would argue that in a place like St. Tammany, where growth is so robust and growth may not occur in the same way that it always has 10, 15 years from now, that 30-year horizon and the projects that are identified through it may have limited utility for you, but you do have in that sort of 10 to 15-year range a much more sort of actionable set of projects based on what your known capacity and congestion issues are. So 30 years is generally the horizon, but I think we'll probably be defining a much more discrete set of projects that's like what you need to get done today.
Okay. Can you clarify that in the plan? Because there's some alignments that seem not a priority at this time, some of the roads identified, whereas other ones are definitely would be more actionable. Could you kind of prioritize them in the plan?
So what our intent would be is based on that regional transportation demand model is to really take what we call those tier 1 projects, the sort of 5 to 15 year ones. I think that those are probably the ones that aren't the sort of major east-west connectors above I-10 or those kinds of things that are in some of your older, longer range planning documents. Yes, and that corresponds with the stakeholder input, the administrative input, and the public feedback that we've gotten as being ultimately the priority.
So you're going to have a
full
tiered
prioritization schedule and what you really need to be focused on coming out the gate.
Tier 1 to tier 4.
Anything else now?
I'm good.
No,
Okay.
continue.
There was when Tammany Trace was being built, there was some discussion about a railroad corridor that came out of Slidell and went north. And I really think it kind of just went by the wayside. It never got off the ground. You aware of that?
So the one definitive sort of expression of interest that you're aware of is north of I-12, coming off the Norfolk Southern Main Line and probably connecting more into the center of the parish from a freight intermodal perspective. I know that there is how to leverage a lot of the the downstream sort of container terminal aspirations that are coming out of both New Orleans and Lower Plaquemines at the moment. Those are some very high volume container ports that they are looking at, and they need sort of different modal facilities to accommodate all that container traffic, especially if it's truck or rail driven, that ultimately is an interchange point off other transportation networks. And so maybe something to that effect, leveraging like a, second, third mile type intermodal facility that would ultimately respond to the larger container terminal aspirations in the lower river.
Okay, well, it started in Slidell and it went north like it was going up to Bogalusa. And, it just kind of went to the wayside. There was just not enough money and interest for that particular one. Now there's across, I can't think of the highway now, but anyway, there's a crossing over what was a railroad track on what's the
Highway 36?
36, yeah, over on the east side, and I think it just kind of tuckered out. Nobody had the monies to get into it, and this was back when Kevin Davis was the president, yeah.
So, inadvertently spend probably too much time in the railroad space personally, but I think, typically when you're looking at new alignments like that, having a user that's ultimately going to drive freight and revenue for the railroads is critical. Whether it's a class 1, which would be your Norfolk Southern type example, or whether it's a short line operator or some other type of public-private partnership to service that, we can certainly look into where there might be some untapped economic development opportunities out there. But there's a lot of logistical and stakeholder coordination that the local governments need to be engaged in order to affect a project like that.
Yeah, this is, I think all the tracks have been pulled and cross ties and all that's been pulled out several years ago. So it was just something that I've kind of been watching, because if you get, the east-west for the Tammany Trace, then, you might want to look at it north-south too, but that's, way down the road.
Oh, you're saying as an abandoned rail corridor to maybe function as a alternative transportation greenway type scenario?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I get you now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I may have missed it, but was there any talk or concern about public transportation in general?
I would say we have had limited engagement related to public transportation. It has not been, the public has almost left the conversation off the table.
Has it been mentioned, or has it just been omitted, like it hasn't talked?
No, it just has not been something that has come up as a transportation priority.
Okay.
And, that is, I think ultimately, right now, the viability of, say, a robust public transportation network is difficult in the sort of diffuse land use issues that you've got at the moment. But as you get sort of into those longer term growth management decisions and, ultimately identifying those areas that you want to grow and maybe establish some intensity long term to accommodate your population growth, that's got to be a part of your discussion.
I have a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Kind of hitchhiking on Mr. Narcisse's. Have we looked at international transportation and how they do that in different countries? Because except for the urban areas in the United States, and transportation's not very efficient. other countries, it is much more efficient. I understand that they're a lot smaller. I understand that we have a problem in St. Tammany Parish with a large parish that's partially rural and partially, but we need to, in my opinion, we need to start somewhere addressing a 30-year plan where we have mass transit movement. I don't know if that necessarily has to be public transit or if it could be privatized. I don't know all of that. But if we don't address that, we're going backwards. Building roads, we're just going to fill the roads up, as we see happening on 190, where we have a superhighway that's done a great job. More and more traffic. That's not going to stop unless we completely stop development in the parish. We don't have a method of moving large groups of people. We need that.
So I hear you loud and clear. I think what the issue from sort of defining in precise terms a public transportation network at this juncture is that in many ways you don't, in most ways you don't have the coordinating sort of land use intensity to really support that, which is where that European model is most typically derived from, right? And so, but the growth management piece of this and in sort of medium term, like, yes, you've got congestion and capacity issues that need to get addressed now. Now, I hear you. We don't want to just build roadway alignments that don't make sense, that don't target places where we've got existing population and that funnel people into places or going to induce growth in places that we don't want to grow. So there is this sort of short-term capacity and congestion issue you've got. I think, and whether it's at the conclusion of this or whatever process it is, there's absolutely the necessity of a much more deliberate growth management discussion, how that has to occur in this parish, and public transportation, of course, is integral into that discussion. But I think we would be premature at this juncture to really get prescriptive about public transportation, much more beyond than what you've already got now with your sort of rural service options.
I'm trying to be visionary.
I'm with you.
When your mic comes on.
So I don't understand this regional transportation plan model, if I even said it right. Is that what is that?
So the regional traffic demand model those are models that are typically curated by your metropolitan planning organization, and they vary in sophistication by the MPO. But generally speaking, what it is a model that evaluates roadway capacity needs long-term, and functionally if the population growth that is expected to occur in particular areas based on existing trends, if that roadway capacity can still maintain its existing level of service. So looking at future population trends, land uses, all of these kinds of things, and factoring in what that growth looks like over time and if the roadway network can handle it.
And so that had been done and you got that data?
Yeah, so the tier one projects that are identified typically through a metropolitan transportation plan, actually that 30-year planning horizon, that regional traffic demand model is used to develop the core content of that plan.
Okay. Do you, I guess my question is there traffic data on all the roads in that map? We saw all those green lines gridding across the parish. Are those based on traffic data or some of the other items you mentioned, like the need for east-west corridors and so forth, because I'll get to my reasoning in a minute, but some of those I've questioned the alignments, the placement of the roads.
And so generally speaking, traffic counts, the only traffic counts that we would have are the ones that are through the publicly available traffic counts that typically are done on your state roadway network.
Okay.
So the green ones would not have traffic counts associated with them or things like that at this juncture.
Oh, there were more than green? So the green was the lower tiered?
Yeah, I'm not recalling the exact color scale, but I'm thinking that we did not define tiers in the public prioritization exercise.
Yeah, so it was, the color coding was either it was a new facility or if it was an existing facility and it needed modification. So I'm not sure which one the green ones were, but if you're talking about alignments, the alignments were just trying to promote idea and thought about how to connect one place to another. So don't think about any of these alignments being set. It's about trying to connect one place to another, and if that connection makes sense. We can get to alignments later on, but this is not about alignments. This is about connecting place to place. We'll get to alignments if and when that 30-year horizon or that particular facility needs to be made. Then we'll have to do stage zero studies and, well, depends on what, if it's a state highway or a local highway, whatever. So it just depends, but it's more of a thought process rather than actual alignment.
Okay. There's a, what I want to focus on is that we really need more environmental information to go into the plan. I've already talked to Parish staff about trying to develop a committee that helps come up with some goals, environmental and conservation goals for the parish that are a little more specific than just the very generic that we have in the UDC. But that hadn't happened yet. But some of the, a lot of that needs to go into place because, yes, roads are great. When you get in your car, roads are great, but then roads can also cause harm and impact some very important environmental areas of the parish. And so how can we, if any of us commissioners want to have some more input on the plan and maybe provide you with some of this information, how can we go about doing that?
Happy to leave you a card.
Pardon?
I'm happy to leave you a card and have as much follow-up discussion as you want on it.
Okay. Where are you located?
I'm based in Baton Rouge.
Okay. Yeah, we really, I think that would be really helpful. I do appreciate that you added all the conservation areas, mitigation banks and parks and so forth. But there's a lot of other areas that could be added, or at least we could hope that there'll be future conservation areas, and so we don't have those on a map to show. But we could show where some of the wettest areas of the parish are, some of the most intact that don't have roads and don't necessarily need roads, if you understand what I mean. So I would love to get with you to just to kind of help provide that.
Certainly, and through this process, while we have not been prescriptive about where you should grow, right? That is a question, though, that ultimately needs to be answered. We have tried to articulate, and we tried to articulate it in the public meeting process, precisely what the challenges are in terms of the rapid population growth that you are going to continue to see over the next 30 years, what that means from a land use consumption standpoint, business as usual, and where all those environmental constraints interplay with that. And it's a bleak picture. And so you have got to get ahead of the conversation, and I'm all ears for you, and I will absolutely listen to it.
Okay, well, I do appreciate that. Thanks.
All right. My turn now?
Hello, my friend. How you doing?
Doing well, Mr. Phil.
I want to go 5 or 10 years from now, not 30 years. And you mentioned about Tier 1, but you said you have not identified any Tier 1 projects yet, correct, or needs?
No, so all the Tier 1 projects are identified, and they're identified in your regional master or metropolitan
Okay.
transportation plan for both the Slidell, Covington, and Mandeville urbanized areas.
Which is managed and created by the RPC.
Okay, yeah. No, I understand that. And I haven't looked at it all through it yet, but I'm assuming and I hope you got some, they got some additional east-west and north-south corridors to move through this parish, because I'm looking at automobiles more than the micro-mobility
Well,
aspect of it.
Understood, and that Tier 1 is absolutely intensively focused on existing population centers and resolving existing congestion issues. It's not, as Commissioner McInnes alluded to, those sort of big grandiose new alignments that are out there.
Well, you just made me happy. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Right now, we run out of time, okay? We're gonna take about a 5-minute break and get everybody seated and everything. And thank you very much for coming and making the presentation. I think there's a lot of work, not only your side, but our side as well.
Yep, and we'll come back after our second round of public meetings, like I said, beginning of January or February or so, after we conclude that second round, and give y'all another update.
Okay? Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.